as we get further and further into the NFL offseason, there's not going to be a lot of football to talk about until we get into about August. But there are 3 specific events that you need to put on your calendar if you are a huge Broncos fan. OTAs and then mandatory minicamp the 29th through the 27th through the 29th, the 3rd through the 5th, and then June 10th through the 12th. What's going on, Broncos country? My name is Trace Moustakas. You can call me Moose. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. And on today's show, we're not talking about the OTAs and those dates. We're talking about potentially signing a very underrated and still on the market linebacker to add to the Broncos room. Should the Broncos pursue this? Well, it's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Now, before we get into that, last Friday, and usually right around this time during the offseason, the bosses like to gather everybody around, all the hosts, and they say, here are some of the new channels that we're thinking about starting. And wouldn't you know it, one of the channels they floated out there into the ether was a Chargers channel. And I was like, no. What, are all 12 fans going to tune in and subscribe? I don't know one singular Chargers fan. So here's what I want you to do for Broncos country. Hit subscribe, and if you've subscribed already, make sure you spam Broncos down in the chat below to stop or at least delay the Chargers channel from being loaded up. All right, before we get into even more about CJ Mosley, let's just talk about the free agent acquisitions the Broncos have made. I thought it was a very successful offseason. I thought the free agency period leading up to the draft, the Broncos got a B+ or an A-. And 2 notable players to add on to our defense were Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. Greenlaw playing that middle linebacker role, and hopefully when Alex Singleton comes back, complements him on that interior linebacking spot. And just even more to, kind of round out what the Broncos did in free agency, adding players like Evan Ingram, and re-signing Stranad, Matt Pert, re-signing him. So all of these moves indicated, at least to me, that the Broncos were happy with last year's success. It was about tweaking rather than re-sculpting the landscape of this team. Now, CJ Mosley, where does he come into play with all of this? Well, Broncos Sports Illustrated actually wrote an article talking about potentially adding one final piece to the Broncos defense. And here's what it said. Kind of like the plan for Greenlaw was he was going to start, you paid him all this money, and then Alex Singleton was going to come back and play side by side with him. But with these 2 having severe injury histories, it's clear the Broncos have a little bit of concern in that linebacker room with not only Greenlaw, but Singleton and Drew Sanders. So, essentially, the article kind of wraps up by saying CJ Mosley could be the insurance policy that Denver is looking for. And I don't disagree with that. A little bit more about Mosley, the player. We're not talking about somebody who just has been a career journeyman in the NFL. We're talking about a 5-time Pro Bowl player, someone that has shown to produce at the highest level, not only against the pass, but against the run. He's a former first-round pick, for crying out loud. And then when he went over to the Jets, he was one of the lone bright spots for that Jets defense. And he could fit perfectly in a Vance Joseph-style defense, which is hyper-fixation and hyper-focus on aggression. And again, the productivity, I could go on and on about it. He is coming off of an injury in 2024 where he had a herniated disc in his neck, and he also had a slight toe injury. I don't know if it was turf toe or what, but you can tell when he's on the field, we're talking about a guy that is just insane. Like, he's one of the best, if not the best linebacker in the NFL outside of a guy named Zaire Franklin or Fred Warner. So he would be the ultimate insurance policy for a injury-riddled linebacker room. I mean, can we all agree on that? The one concern is not the talent or the ability to make plays, but it's the injuries, right? Because I look back at last year and I say we lost Alex Singleton. We lost Drew Sanders. We do have Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito, but they play more like edges They get after the quarterback. That's their primary goal. So getting back a Singleton and having Greenlaw is great, and I expect those two to be our starters. But what were to happen if one of those guys was going to go down? And we can take a look at the injury history, and we can see from last year alone, there are some concerns, even with Mosley. A herniated disc is nothing ever to scoff at. I've had a herniated disc. It is not fun. Very painful. Mobility is limited. But the law of averages would tell you that one of these guys is going to get injured throughout the 2025 season. That's just statistics. So could you add a CJ Mosley to not only be that insurance policy, but a cheap insurance policy that has tremendous upside? And the upside, if you were to add a CJ Mosley, would be the experience would be unmatched. This Broncos linebacker room would not only have the veteran presence that you're looking for, but the talent that you're looking for. And if all things go well, one of the most productive linebacking rooms in the NFL. Now, there is a con to every single pro, and all of these players are coming off of injuries. Every single one of them. The upside on Drew Sanders is that we haven't really seen him play as much because of his injuries, but you don't pay somebody based off of upside. You pay off of production. And CJ Mosley has been a productive player. So if you were to sign him to, let's say, a $5 million deal, 1 year prove-it deal, he could be the player that, as a rotational piece, or a depth piece even, could find his way onto the field and still give you that excellent production that we're talking about. But again, it's not up to me. I'm not George Payton. I'm not Sean Payton. I can't make that decision unilaterally. So I'll ask you in the comments, would you sign CJ Mosley? Give me a yes or a no. I wouldn't sign him for a single cent over $6 million, and it would only be a 1 year deal. So I'm going to say a yes, but I'll say a soft yes as of right now. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Okay, we're going to kind of pivot. This all kind of bleeds together, if you will. How the Denver Broncos can take this defense that is already top 5 in the NFL, maybe top 3, and get even better. Perfection is unobtainable, but you can strive for perfection and land on excellence. Now, ESPN recently came out with their 2025 projections for all 32 teams, and they currently have the Broncos as the number 4 defense in the NFL, projecting them as, I should say, the number 4 defense in 2025. Now, that sounds great until you look at the company that we're with, and then I have some slight pause because there's only one other name on this list that I actually agree with. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. ESPN projects the Lions to have the number 1 defense in the NFL. That is probably the most insane thing I've ever heard. Considering the Lions, I'll give you this, they were injured last year tremendously. They had, at one point, I think, 9 starters out. There is no way the Lions have the number 1 defense in the NFL. So let's just take a step back there. So I think the Broncos will end up having a top 3 defense regardless of signing a CJ Mosley. Now, there is one particular scheme that I think the Broncos need to implement slightly more in order to prove that they can shut down the very best of NFL offenses. Right now, that being the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, before I tell you what that scheme is, make sure that you start shopping for your 2025 Broncos season with our friends at Fanatics. This particular shirt right now is 25% off. So all you got to do is use this link that I've put in the comments and description of today's video to start your Fanatics shopping today. Again, 25% off, it's like $10.99 that you're saving. That's a sweet deal. And you want to start shopping before the deal ends because as we get closer to the football season, all of these things are going to get more expensive. So if you want to start gearing up for it right now, make sure, like I said, you use this link in the comments and description of today's video. Okay, the scheme that I'm talking about is a 4-4 split defense. Now stay with me for a second for all of you who maybe aren't as jargon advanced in the NFL world. Essentially what a 4-4 split is is 8 men lined up in the box with 4 defensive linemen and 4 linebackers scooting up onto the edge. It highlights those 8 men in the box and has 3 defensive backs in the backfield. So the one particular thing that you would be looking for is to move a single high safety up to not get beat over the top. Now, when is it most successful? You're probably wondering to yourself, okay, this sounds like a pretty interesting topic, but why does it work? Well, it works when you have elite cornerbacks and safeties that have not only great speed, but great man coverage skills as well. If you can press a wide receiver off the line of scrimmage and take away that vertical passing route, this is probably the most unguardable defense in the NFL. Now, what's the one con of it? Well, if you don't have elite speed and elite corners, any wide receiver that can burn you on a go route and stretching the field, it's going to take the top off of you. And it's not going to be particularly close. So if you get a quarterback that is great at throwing the deep ball and has a receiver that can just burn you off the line, good luck. But I think with the additions that we've made, not only in the draft, but the progression that we've seen from a Riley Moss, from a Jaquan McMillan, Pat Surtain's the best cornerback in the league. You mean to tell me that we couldn't run this defense to the best of its ability? Vance Joseph has the opportunity to make this defense a staple. Now, again, every team is different and schemes are based off of different teams. You don't want to run the exact same defensive scheme every single time. It's just not the way it works. There's going to be teams that highlight the run like the Eagles and teams that are more pass heavy like the Bengals. So all of this is just, it's more situational. It's week to week, ephemeral, if you will. Now, notable coaches that run the 4-4. Guys that highlight it more often than not. 2 guys in particular, Harbaugh and Campbell. Well, let's be real. Detroit was great last year. Defense was also very, very talented before the injuries. And Harbaugh, every single season, rolls out great defenses. Matt Patricia also runs this, maybe not as successfully as the other 2 guys listed above, but there's a reason Patricia keeps getting jobs. And right now, he's at Ohio State. It's because he knows defense. These guys know defense, albeit Dan Campbell more so a better hirer than he is a schematics guy. So all of that to ask you this before we wrap out our show. Where will Denver's defense rank in 2025? If you were to take the things that I've talked about in today's video and plug them into the 2025 Broncos defense, you let me know where they're going to finish. And if they do the things that I'm talking about and they continue to get after the quarterback at a high rate and our secondary gets even better than it was last year, we're talking not top 5, not top 3, number 1. All right, remember, subscribe if you haven't. Spam Broncos in the comment section down below. And make sure you delay this Chargers channel from coming onto the Chat Sports lineup. I don't want to see a single Thunderbolt for the next few months. My name is Moose. Until next time, be cool.